Hello and welcome everyone to part 5 of our Advancing Healthy Aging webinar series. I would like to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded in both English and Spanish. With that being said, this series is designed with you in mind to provide valuable insights and tools that can empower you to navigate age-related conversations and support healthy aging within your local community. Our team would like to thank the USDA Rural Health and Safety Education Grant, which has made this series possible. Part of our grant is to collect data and feedback on this series, so at the end of the webinar and in a follow-up email, we will share a link with an optional quick survey in both English and Spanish. Our team very much appreciates your participation in this survey. Your data will be kept confidential and used to inform future programming and other healthy aging initiatives for CSU Extension. Lastly, the chat is open throughout the presentation, so please use the chat to ask any questions you may have, and we will answer them throughout the presentation and at the end as well. With that, I would like to introduce you to Colorado State University professor, Dr. Christine Fruhoff. We are very lucky here at CSU Extension to have Dr. Fruhoff as the Human Development and Family Studies Extension Director, where she actively participates, leads, and supports so many aspects of CSU Health Extension. In addition, she also is the program coordinator for the Gerontology Interdisciplinary Minor and the director of the Prevention Research Center Healthy Aging Division. Welcome, Dr. Fruhoff. We're excited to hear from you about how Extension and community partners can strengthen intergenerational connections.
Thank you, Ginger. I'm so happy to be here today, sharing why intergenerational relationships are vital to healthy aging. And what I wanted to share briefly is that this webinar, I'll address some important findings from research, focusing on familial and non-familial intergenerational connections. And then I'll also talk about strategies and ideas for implementing intergenerational programming in communities through 4-H, community development, family consumer science, and health extension. And I really look forward to spending this time with you. So with that, we'll get started. The outline that I've chosen to use today is to talk first about intergenerational relationships. And please know that it is a brief overview. This is not something that I could cover in an hour, 45-minute to an hour webinar, because we're really talking about good 40, 50, 60 years of research in this area. But I am also going to talk about benefits of familial and non-familial intergenerational connections. And then answer the question, how might extension and community partners work together to strengthen intergenerational programming in their communities? And then lastly, we'll have some time for questions for further discussion. Some questions I've already put forward for all of you. And then if you would like to see my references, they are available by request. So before I begin, I'd like to actually take the lead of one of my colleagues, Dr. Ali Brothers. So if you're following along in the webinar, previous webinar focusing on flipping the script on age and addressing ageism and how we can support older adults, she added her bio and some of her perspectives that she's taken in her career. And I just want to follow her lead and share with you a little bit more about myself. And I've been at Colorado State University for 22 years in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies. And I've actually earned my degrees in Human Development and Family Studies. And I also received a graduate certificate in Gerontology. And so really what this means is that I study family aspects of adult development and aging. And I've done so for quite some time. I mainly focus my work on aging family issues, and I'm particularly interested in grandparent-grandchild relationships and relationships between family care partners and their care recipients. I've co-edited books on such topics, and I've published several peer-reviewed papers on topics addressing aging families. More recently, I have taken on the position with the Colorado State University Prevention Research Center, where I direct the Healthy Aging Division, and have begun to really reframe some of my work from a prevention standpoint. And some of you might be asking, well, what are you trying to prevent? I'm happy to share more about what that might mean. Because there are several areas that scholars might focus their work on prevention and aging. And there's been more recent, I would say in the last 5, 6, 7 years, about thinking about prevention from a whole body, whole life standpoint as it relates to aging. So it's been really exciting to work with the Prevention Research Center staff and faculty in this space. I also teach both undergraduate and graduate courses here at Colorado State University on topics such as aging, introduction to gerontology. I've taught an aging family course at the graduate level. And in the last 10 years, I've really enjoyed teaching our graduating seniors in our senior capstone course, where here at Colorado State University, we focus on grant writing. And it's really fun to have students work in groups to write grants to uplift programs in their communities. I also consider myself an engaged scholar, and much of my research has not only come from the academic literature, such as like, what are the researchers' next steps in this area? But the ideas I've come up with have really been co-created with communities. In particular, some of the work I'll share a little bit later, working with grandparents who raise grandchildren, they really have been my cheerleaders and have said to me, you know, Christine, that idea might be great. It might be something that you've read, but I really think we need this in the community. And that's been a lot of fun and a very rewarding aspect to my work. Along the same lines, I think of myself as an extension champion, and I've worked with CSU Extension since I started at Colorado State University. And more formally in my role directing my department's engagement and extension programs and initiatives. And I could say my interests really stemmed from my interest and passion working with Colorado State University Extension stems from my previous experience as a 4-H'er. And as part of earning my graduate certificate in gerontology, I actually completed an internship with the Ohio State University Extension System, where I focus my work on supporting healthy aging programming. So it's just, again, so fun to be here with you today. And with that, let's get started on talking a bit more about intergenerational relationships. And intergenerational relationships, sometimes in the literature, scholars will talk about intergenerational ties. And these ties often involved bonds between adults of different generations. Okay, and usually they're descendants. So this can include parent-child relationships, right? And as we think about aging, we might think about midlife parents and young adult offspring, or as we look later in the lifespan, aging parents and midlife adult offspring. We might also think about grandparents and grandchildren, and even great-grandparents and great-grandchildren. We could also think about, as I've shared earlier, grandfamilies. And so grandfamilies are grandparents and the grandchildren in their homes with no parent present. Now, we also are going to think about non-familial relationships. And so this could include everything from coworkers and neighbors, as you think about who do you work with? What are perhaps the chronological ages of your coworkers? And might you see some similarities, but maybe there's some differences based on generation. It also could be neighbors, right? Who are you living next to? Are these older adults or are these young adults with young children, right? And we might also just consider non-familial relationships from just community members, so youth and older adults. And so for today's presentation, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into the grandparent-grandchild relationship, as well as talk a little bit about grandfamilies, because again, this is an area of interest that I have, as well as talk a bit more about community members. So bringing non-familial youth and non-familial older adults together for intergenerational related programs. So let's get started with grandparents and grandchildren. So I'll just ask you to think for a second, what needs to happen before someone becomes a grandparent? Right? Well, for one, it would mean that you yourself have children, right? And then those children have children. That's how individuals become grandparents, right? If we're talking from a familial standpoint. And there are some contemporary grandparenting trends that we are seeing and that we've seen in the last 20 plus years. So we know that about 80% of 30-year-olds have at least one grandparent alive, which is pretty fascinating, right? With increased longevity, with healthy aging, we know that the grandparent-grandchild relationship doesn't just include grandchildren who are under the age of 18, right? We can see grandchildren being well into their 30s and having more adult grandparent relationships. We also know that about half of all grandparents in the United States are under the age of 60, which might also lead to some different ways that younger grandparents might interact with their grandchildren and or responsibilities that these grandparents might have, right? So grandparents might still be working and maybe they don't have as much time to engage in the grandparenting role because of work responsibilities. We also know that because of family dynamics and structural changes, there might be less opportunities to have children. We've seen a decrease in fertility rates. And so we actually recognize that about 20% of older adults are not grandparents. This could be because of their children are not having children or because they themselves have not had children, whether that be voluntary or involuntary. We also are recognizing that with changes in marital relationships, that about 20 to 25% of grandparents actually might be step-grandparents. Lastly, though, what we recognize is that grandparents today spend more time in the grandparent role than previous generations. And that's mainly because they're living longer. So it's really exciting for those of us that study aging family relationships, grandparent-grandchild relationships, to focus their work in this area. So, next question that I have for all of you, and you can think about this for a moment. What is your grandparenting style? Or if you're not a grandparent, how might you want to interact with grandchildren? So I ask you that, and I'll share with you that from the literature, we've seen this as early as the 1960s with one of the first studies looking at both grandmothers and grandfathers and how they interact with their grandchildren and the types of style or the role that they play. And we can see from Newgarten and Weinstein's work that grandparents may take on a more formal role to grandparenting, very formal, interact, within certain ways that they might deem important. And yet we might see more of a fun seeker, somebody who might want to engage in multiple activities, get on the ground and run around, take the grandchildren to events, etc. We might find, though, that grandparent is a distant figure. That could be because of family circumstance, maybe strain, maybe conflict, or maybe they're a distant figure because of geographic location. Surrogate parent. This is oftentimes we see when grandparents might have to parent, and because of something that might be going on with the middle generation. And then lastly, we've seen reservoir family wisdom. This is when a grandparent really believes that their role as a grandparent is to give or teach a grandchild values, morals, or maybe it's a skill passed down, kind of a family history. So you can see, I'm not going to go into all these others, but researchers have really wanted to unpack what grandparenting styles, roles, and the kind of the meaning that is ascribed to this, this family role. And I encourage you, if you want to take a look at any of these, I'm happy to share with you again these references. One thing I'll add, though, Troll in the 80s talked quite a bit about the watchdog. This is the grandparent that may watch, a parent-child interaction and make sure that the grandchild is doing well. Kind of came about when we started to see an increase in divorce and wanted to make sure that that grandchild had their needs met. And so the watchdog would stand at a distance and kind of watch and intervene if needed. if the grandparent felt like their support was needed. So it's kind of interesting to kind of look at some of these roles. And perhaps there's something on here, those of you that are grandparents or are thinking about the grandparent role that you don't see on here. And I'd love to, you could put that in the chat, or we could certainly talk about that later when it's time for Q&A. So as I kind of alluded to, there are important considerations for intergenerational relationships when we think about familial intergenerational relationships. So family conflict, certainly family dynamics, maybe this could include separation and divorce. But I wanted to add that in the literature, some scholars have often talked about the middle generation as a mediator to the grandparent-grandchild relationship. And they've gone even so far, these scholars have gone so far as even saying that grandparents and grandchildren share a common enemy, right? And that's the middle generation, or the adult child, or the parent of the grandchild. And usually when I say that, people get a little chuckle, though I can't hear anybody in the audience, but just to think about that, right? And how also the middle generation might mediate when grandchildren see their grandparents. I'll just share real quickly. Years ago, I was asked by our local hospital to come to a new moms group to talk about grandparent-grandchild dynamics, because the facilitator was reflecting and hearing a lot about from these first-time parents, and particularly this was a moms group, but these first-time moms sharing how challenging it has been to negotiate interactions with their parents or their in-laws in monitoring how involved grandparents might be. So again, family conflict strain, that can happen. And it just was so fascinating to have a conversation with these new moms about what that's like. So anyhow, just kind of add that from my own experience working in the communities. We also see geographic distance, physical distance. This is certainly well discussed in the literature that, this can pose problems. You might want to be the fun seeker grandparent, but you can't engage as much. You can't engage in those fun activities or do those things that you want to do. And so as a result, you might be more of a distant figure, right? Where you only come around every so often because of that geographic distance. Also just time, as I alluded earlier, with half of grandparents being under the age of 60, you might just find that you've got work responsibilities, or you might even have caregiving responsibilities to a spouse or a partner, or to your own parents, and therefore you don't have time to engage in that grandparent role. And then lastly, health. Your own health, grandparents' health certainly can play a role in the amount of contact and maybe the level of, or the quality of contact that you have, depending on your health. So these are just some things to just consider as you're starting to think about grandparent-grandchild relationships. Okay, so diving into grandfamilies. So again, grandfamilies is a larger term that Generations United coined some time ago that includes grandparents and the grandchildren in their homes with no parent present. And they also include other kin. So this could be aunts and uncles, maybe siblings. It could even be a trusted friend or neighbor that is taking on primary caregiving responsibilities for a child, again, when there's no parent present. And so what do we know about grandfamilies? So in general, we know that there's about 8 million grandparents are actually raising grandchildren. So again, no parent is present in the home. When we look at grandchildren compared to their age-related peers who are being raised by their biological or adopted parents or guardians, grandchildren are more likely to be poor and have lower socioeconomic status than, again, their peers. Grandparents tend to have higher rates of disability than parents or guardians. And we also know from the literature that grandparents, when compared to their peers, their age-related peers who are not raising grandchildren, they also have higher rates of chronic disease and show more depressive symptoms. So this is also something that from the standpoint that I'm concerned about is how can we help these grandparents who are raising grandchildren knowing some of this literature. We also know that grandfamilies are racially and ethnically diverse. This family structure is not focused on one race or one ethnic group or one cultural group over the other. Again, we see that this is very diverse, and that grandfamilies tend to live together for a long time. Okay, so there might be a short-term situation where a grandparent might say, okay, I'll take a grandchild in, but oftentimes we tend to see on average, I think it's 7 or 8 years that grandchildren are living with their grandparent, again, with no parent present. So this is just, again, a brief overview of some of the things that we know about grandfamilies to provide some context. You might be asking yourself, well, what are the reasons why individuals serve as custodial grandparents? And custodial grandparents, just to be clear, custodial here goes a step further than this idea of grandfamilies when there's no parent present. But custodial grandparents really alludes to the fact that there is some custody or guardianship or an allocation of parental rights that allows for that grandparent to provide for the grandchild, as opposed to more informal situations. And so I would say that even though I'm going to share with you what we see from the literature from the custodial grandparent side, I would say that many of these reasons are true also for those in informal situations. So when the literature first started exploring this family structure, we tended to see that death of a parent, perhaps divorce, and or abandonment of the child were the reasons that really rose to the top for why grandparents were taking on primary caregiving responsibilities. And then over time, we started to see more literature related to raising grandchildren due to drug and alcohol use and abuse of the middle generation, which also often led to neglect or an unsafe living environment. And I would say more recently, we've started to see more discussion around mental and physical health. I think that's also probably in line with the fact that we are talking more about mental health in particular, with the impacts of mental and physical health on daily living, parenting, etc. And then we also see literature pointing to incarceration, military deployment, and then I think it's coming back up, knowing with some current experiences that are happening right now, but when a parent might be deported. So if grandparents are available, they will take on raising grandchildren. But I want to say, and this is pretty clear, there are many reasons why. And although the literature points to these things I just discussed, we often do not know all the reasons why grandparents are raising grandchildren. So I really want to be clear and talk about community co-creation. I once presented something very similar to some of my community groups on grandparents raising grandchildren, and grandparents were very adamant to say this to me. So just want to recognize that we often don't know all the reasons. Lastly, I want to share that, as you can tell, most of these reasons, if not really all of them, are due to something that happened to the middle generation, right? Something that happened to that parent. Because the literature has really been in that space, a few years ago, my colleagues and I actually analyzed answers to open-ended questions asking grandparents why they made the decision to provide care, right? So I might be presenting some of these reasons here, but why did they make the decision to provide care, knowing that maybe foster care could have been available, right? And so what we discovered is that there were 15 domains that influence grandparents' decision to raise grandchildren. And just to give you a couple ideas, what we saw, and again, I'm happy to share this article with anybody who's interested, but we saw grandparents talk about the number one thing was love for the grandchildren or concern for a grandchild's emotional, physical safety. Another example was how they came to this is that couples were working together to make the decision, or there was challenges. There was different opinions or disagreements between couples on making that decision. And so again, wanted to share that that what I presented here earlier, what you see on the slides, are really reasons associated with that middle generation. But we also know grandparents do make that decision to provide care. And so if you want to know more of the other 13 domains, I'm happy to share with you that information. Okay, so now moving on to non-familial intergenerational relationships, in particular thinking about community members. So as I've shared already, there might be some structural drivers why adults, particularly older adults, might want to seek out non-familial relationships. So one, individuals don't have grandchildren of their own. It could be there's family conflict or strain leads to grandparents not having a relationship with their grandchildren. Again, could be geographic proximity that might prevent grandparents from seeing grandchildren. Or we also see health reasons and perhaps leading to some of those challenges related to having relationships with grandchildren. So just to kind of put that out there, that could be some structural drivers of non-familial intergenerational relationships. And then there's also some theoretical support. And there are several theories that can be applied to intergenerational programs. And I'm only going to highlight 3 of them for sake of time. But one, when we think about Vygotsky's research on child development and social learning, some scholars have said, well, engaging with older adults might allow for children to build their social and cognitive skills. Okay. A second one might be thinking about the life course development, or Erik Erikson's theory. Intergenerational programming might help children with identity development. Perhaps they could learn a little bit more about who they are or how they see themselves. And particularly along this same theoretical standpoint, older adults, intergenerational programming might help them with generativity or giving to the next generation or teaching other skills. And then lastly, Tom Kitwood's work on the theory of personhood. This can represent the importance of respect and rights of all individuals. And really, the theory personhood grew out of dementia care research. And I love this piece because I think that sometimes we often think that older adults don't have a place in our society, right? Or perhaps they're not as valued as much. But I also think that young children might also experience some of this ageism. And again, my colleague, Dr. Brothers, talked about some of this in the previous webinar. But thinking about young children should be respected and uplifted, as well as adults and older adults, and perhaps even older adults with dementia or other disabilities, chronic illnesses, etc. So those are just a couple theories, but there are several other theories that have been used to frame non-familial intergenerational programming. And I really encourage you to take a look at Dr. Shannon Jarrett's work. She's at the Ohio State University, and she's just done some exceptional work in this area. So then lastly, so thinking about community members, non-familial intergenerational programming, there are really 4 ways to approach non-familial intergenerational programming. And Dr. Sally Newman, who is at University of Pittsburgh, outlined this work. And so she said, 1, youth serving older adults. Right? First and foremost, you can have youth serving older adults. Second, older adults serving youth. Third, older adults and youth serving together. And then older adults and youth sharing sites. And I'm going to give you an example of that because later in my presentation, I'm going to give you steps where you could engage in programming in your own committee that touches on these 3 others. But this last one, I don't actually have any suggestions because it's a little bit trickier. But older adults and youth sharing sites, first and foremost, I have seen there's just a few across the country where preschools and adult day centers are in the same building, right? Or they have been designed to serve, again, youth, young children, and older adults together. So that's one area. It's very structured. It's very, very focused on bringing these two generations together at a shared site. I've also seen some work in other communities where they've been focused on housing for older adults and youth that might identify as GLBTQ IA plus. And so just thinking about some more formalized areas to which IG programming could operate. So with that, I've got one more slide before I'm going to get into perhaps what you're all really interested in, and that's like, how do you put this all together? But I wanted to share with you just some benefits of intergenerational connections. So for one, literature has continued to say that grandmothers in particular speak about having close, very warm relationships with their grandchildren, making those emotional connections. Grandchildren often talk about recognizing that they are closer to grandmothers, but that's not to say that grandchildren don't identify grandfathers as having a close relationship. Grandmothers often say that they're very satisfied with their grandparenting role. We see grandfathers actually talk about that they believe that they've had more emotional connections and been more nurturing with grandchildren when compared to how they maybe parented their own children. And grandfathers have even said that grandparenthood might serve as actually a second chance for them to engage in close connections with the younger generation. So really kind of exciting to see some of that literature. Grandchildren have actually indicated that they enjoy learning skills from their grandparents. They've even learned family values and morals. Grandparents often provide assistance to grandchildren with homework, so they might benefit from that support from their grandparents. Grandparents might also support grandchildren financially, perhaps paying for fun activities, maybe travel. Maybe they've even offset costs. We see this in the literature that grandparents might offset costs related to, the costs related to playing a sport in a school or even musical education. So grandchildren might benefit in those ways. Grandchildren have also, from some of my work, when I've looked at 20-year-old grandchildren who were providing care to their grandparents, they learned skills related to careers, to even wanting to engage now in medicine or nursing because of the caregiving that they were doing. And then lastly, I'll just add, for non-familiar relationships, we really see that in these areas, older adults who engage in intergenerational programs with youth may find a reduction in feelings of isolation and loneliness, may have an increased quality of life. And then for youth, intergenerational programming may actually reduce the broader issue of ageism, right, by offering youth opportunities to interact with older adults. So I'm actually going to stop there and put up my next slide and just ask, Ginger, if there's any questions, anybody wants me to clarify anything, I can. If not, I can move on to the nitty gritty of perhaps some application to what I've just shared.
Let's see. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, Christine, but we can maybe move on and yep. I'll keep collecting them as we go.
All right, that sounds good. Okay. All righty. So my question is, how might Extension and community partners work together to strengthen intergenerational programming? And so what I put together, 7 steps towards supporting intergenerational connections. And I really think that this could be used among any of you in community agencies, but also those of you representing extension serving 4-H, as well as family consumer science or health extension. And so the first step, plan now for Grandparents' Day. Some of you may know Grandparents' Day is the second Sunday in September, and you could think about hosting an event on that second Sunday, or perhaps you want to have series of events throughout that week leading up to it, or even in the whole month of September. You don't have to do it actually on that day. But what I'll share with you is that Generations United, so when I put up on here, gu.org, they have a Grandparents' Day Take Action Guide. And in this Take Action Guide, they have several ideas of what you could do together. Particularly, I love the ones related to volunteering. And so some of my favorites that I've applied to extension is maybe consider having 4-H club visit a long-term care facility in your local community and maybe host an afternoon game time, maybe board games, cards, puzzles together. Or maybe you might consider having a 4-H club and a local Rotary club connect at a community park to pick up litter or clear out paths or remove weeds. Or maybe since it's September, maybe there's some early fall cleanup. And then afterwards you could have a picnic, right? Or maybe you could even build in seeking out the support of a local environmentalist to come talk about the importance of recycling or how to reduce our carbon footprint together. So these are just a couple ideas, but the Grandparent Day Take Action Guide on gu.org or at Generations United gives you a lot of extra or additional examples that you might think about as you do something for Grandparents' Day, which I think is a lot of fun. Step 2, you might think about Pocket or maybe a grab and go or plug and play extension program related to intergenerational programming. And I'm going to add, and you can see I have an image up here for Penn State intergenerational programs. Dr. Matt Kaplan has been a leader in this field for a while, and he works with Penn State's extension system. He's created a number of intergenerational activities that you could use. And a couple of my favorite that I put up here is just intergenerational reading, working with a local preschool or even a kindergarten class to have older adults come and read to the youth. Or you might even do an intergenerational cooking class. One of the ones that Dr. Kaplan at Penn State puts together is like this idea of baking now and then. And so he outlines in some of the resources he has is talking about creating or baking, like let's just take baking brownies from scratch versus buying the box brownies. And so you could have a group of young adults, youth, and older adults baking brownies from scratch and ones who use the box. And then you could do different taste tests, or you could have them talk about time, flavor, nutrition, right? So you could really think about some of the different activities you could do as a one-off, right? Or grab and go. You could even do more of like a creating scrapbook pages, right? Bring older adults and youth together with their scrapbook supplies and create pages, and then have those individuals there talk about the pictures that they're putting on that page. And then lastly, this was pretty popular during the COVID times, but might link individuals who might live at a distance or virtually by looking through online art museum tours, right? So you could set up something very easily online with having youth and older adults kind of connect, and then having them also go through a museum together. So this is just, again, a idea of thinking about some simple one-off programs that you might be able to bring generations together. So step 3, well, if you really love these pocket programs and you've done a few, now maybe you want to see if an evidence-based program or an evidence-informed intergenerational program is useful in your community. So I've shared on the 4-H website, there's a Youth Advocates for Community Health, and you can go right to the 4-H website and click on that. This is a program where older adults and youth work together to solve a problem in their community. I think it's pretty similar to Family Leadership Training Institute that we have here at Colorado State University, and it is designed so that it is an intergenerational focused work. Food for Long Life. This is a community-based intergenerational project with Ohio State University and Virginia Tech, both land-grant institutions, where they work together with preschool and bring older adults to learn about nutrition and food. And they have a very strong focus on supporting youth and older adults with some food security challenges. So really kind of exciting. I encourage you to check out their website to get some additional ideas. Also, the Grand Cares Project. This is really designed for, again, grandfamilies, both grandparents and grandchildren, to help uplift self-care skills for grandparents and leadership skills and life skill development for grandchildren through a 6-week program. Again, website is provided for you to take a closer look, and I'm happy to chat more about that. I've also put on some evidence-based or evidence-informed intergenerational programs that are not directly tied to extension. But you can see AARP Foundation has uplifted Experience Corps volunteer program where adults, particularly in the Baltimore area, have gone into the school systems to help youth with reading, with homework, with just connecting socially. It's also very similar to AmeriCorps' the Foster Grandparent Program. And this, again, is designed for Americans 55 years and older in volunteer service and to provide one-on-one support to children with particularly special needs to improve their academic, social, or emotional development. And that's a great program that you could take a look at through AmeriCorps. And then a third program I'm just uplifting because I've had some experience with is the Cyber Seniors Program. If you again go on to Cyber Seniors website, you can see that they provide free technology support and training for older adults. And they started that through intergenerational programming, where you can see in this photo, a student of mine a few years ago worked with an older adult just to kind of help, like, with his tablet, with his laptop. And one of the things I just love about that event that we hosted at our local senior center here in Fort Collins, Colorado, was that both the older adults and the youth, the college age students, said they had such a great time. They didn't realize how similar they were. And the older adults, many of them said that it was so easy to talk to these youth, unlike asking their family members for help. So just some fun ways of thinking about how to bring generations together. And continuing on step 3, if you've caught the bug and you really want to create your own evidence-informed intergenerational program, I would say first and foremost, consider working with other extension professionals, collaborate with extension faculty on your local campuses, but also those that are studying adult development and aging. In addition, get input from internal and external stakeholders. And so I'm going to just share with you briefly that one of my colleagues, Dr. Jen Anks, who's a regional health specialist in the mountain region here in Colorado, she was learning from her communities that they wanted to bridge the generations. They wanted to do something together. And so through our summer paid extension internships, we worked with a graduate student who is pictured in this flyer to have conversations with youth in the counties that Dr. Ank serves and older adults. And so through her research, I put a couple quotes on there that really showed that there is a need, there's a desire, and that that there's some specific areas to which they could use some additional help. And so one of the things in the end that our graduate student discovered is that that really both of the areas in the communities that she was working is that they wanted to have youth help the older adults with technology. So this also maps onto that cyber seniors piece. But in general, right, there is this desire from these stakeholders to move forward. So I would say before you move forward with any kind of programming is to do some needs assessment, talk to the stakeholders, do some interviews, talk to the youth, talk to the older adults to see what that might look like. And then if you've even gone the next step, right, maybe there's some coalition building. Maybe there's some coalition building about bridging generations, or in the work that I've done, thinking about how to better support grandparents raising grandchildren. And so I share a little bit, I share a publication that we had published years ago. We've had several others from some evaluation work, but in 2007, our county extension office in Northern Colorado was consistently hearing from agencies and grandparents that they need help. But one agency couldn't do it together. And so this extension specialist at the time said, well, you know what, I can't necessarily do it all alone, but we can pull people together. And very quickly, within the first year and a half, we were able to secure funding from some of the agencies to hire a kinship provider, county kinship provider that just worked with grandparents raising grandchildren and helped them with even everything from crisis related needs to counseling to fun activities. And then it led to additional grant dollars that helped us support some initiatives. And I'm proud to say that in 2025, the Larimer County Alliance for Grandfamilies is still meeting. We meet monthly, except for the months of July and December, and we've really seen a growth in our partners and the work that we've been able to do over time. So again, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about that, but coalition building could be something that you engage in. So then again, building on that, there might be a strong interest to say, you know what, I've been doing some of these, done something for Grandparents' Day, I've done a pocket program here and there, I'm doing some more formal intergenerational programming, and let's get a grant together. So I just put some foundations and entities up here that I know funds both well, first and foremost, intergenerational programming, but fund both familial and non-familial programming. So take a look at USDA NIFA. They have two mechanisms in particular: children, youth, and families at risk, as well as the rural health and safety education that has funded IG related programs. The Brookdale Foundation Group has a strong focus in grandfamilies, and they have a relatives as parents program, and they have funded extension programs in the past. The Eisner Foundation has a strong focus in non-familial programming, and same with RRF, Foundation for Aging. And I have colleagues who have been successful in getting funding from those the third and fourth foundation that I mentioned. I've have some experience and have been successful with funding from USDA, NIFA, and the Brookdale Foundation Group. So, and what I'll add is community partners are a must, particularly for those first two entities. So take a look at those grant opportunities. And again, I'm happy to share more with you if you've got specific questions about them. But let's say you want some more education. So in general, you might just want to read more. Highly recommend, again, Generations United website. They have so much information. They have a lot of white papers and informational resources. You can also sign up to get what they call Generations This Week, which is I think it comes out about weekly or every other week, but they talk about funding. They have other notices and resources. On Generations website, they actually have a white paper focused on rural grandfamilies, and it's an excellent resource for any of you that might live and work in rural communities. So I highly suggest you go on their website and check that out. There's also two academic journals that you may be interested in reading or just kind of perusing through, and that's the Journal of Intergenerational Relationships, and then Grandfamilies, the Contemporary Journal of Research, Practice, and Policy. Both of those journals not only have that academic research type of papers published in there, but they also have a lot of applied work. So if you're really wanting to look like, oh, I want a program that does this, or I want to know how to do this type of work, you can search those journals for some of that more applied hands-on work. And then lastly, I am just going to give a little shameless plug for checking out a book that I co-edited with my colleague, Dr. Bert Hayslip, titled Grandparenting: Influences on the Dynamics of Family Relationships. It's a great book, edited book chapters, so from some excellent scholars in the healthy aging field and aging families. So you can take a look at that as well. And continuing more education, you might find that you want a little bit more formal education. So first and foremost, at Colorado State University through CSU Online, it's a division of the Office of Engagement and Extension. We actually have undergraduate and graduate courses related to adult development and aging, where there are lessons within these courses where you would be able to pull out aging family issues, intergenerational relationships, etc. So you could check out Colorado State University's adult development and aging programs. And then secondly, the Ohio State University has a course that actually would provide continuing education credits focused on intergenerational programs. And its focus is on evidence and practice. And I did put on the slide, I know I actually was in communication with the developer, Dr. Shannon Jarrett, of this program, and she was so kind to offer a fee waiver code, which I put up on the slide. So if you are interested in signing up for that class, when you go to register, if you type in this code, I think it's M1YFCH, there is a fee waiver. Now, she did tell me that there is a limited number, so just know that when you're registering. But it's very kind of her to offer this fee waiver code for any of you that are interested in more education around intergenerational programs. And then step 7, I just offered a few websites that you can take a look at, some of which I've already talked about earlier, but wanted to put in these slides so that you have them pretty handy. So then just a quick recap. Yeah, first and foremost, intergenerational relationships are important to healthy aging. And I believe that there's several ways to strengthen intergenerational connections in your community. The first one, as I've shared, Grandparents' Day is just a great day to do something, maybe dip your toe in the intergenerational space. And then 2, you could think about pocket programs. Again, Penn State, Dr. Matt Kaplan has a number of different programs that you could pick up and implement pretty quickly. 3, if you are finding you're really loving this and you want to do some more evidence-based programming that might take over, consecutive weeks, highly encourage that. 4th, think about coalition building, right? Think about how you might create space for further depth and also engaging with other internal and external stakeholders to help build intergenerational connections in your community. And then follow up with some grant writing to fund that work, which is exciting. Maybe some additional education, whether it's your own reading or some formal education or even continuing education credits. And then lastly, check out some websites. There's a lot of great information out there. And so that is actually all I have. So I do have some discussion questions that I could put out, but we can always toggle back and I can pull those up later. But I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. Please reach out to me to talk more about intergenerational relationships and programs. And pretty easy to find at Colorado State. I put my email in here. And Ginger, that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christine. I appreciate all of that. And just so exciting to see all the work that's being done at CSU across Extension and ways that communities can engage with Extension to grow intergenerational relationships. So I just wanted to remind everybody we've got the evaluation links. I put them in the chat. I can put them in there again. But we just want to open it up to whoever has any questions. Just share them in the chat.
And would you like me to stop sharing my slide? Should I do that?
Yeah, sure. That would
Okay.
work.
Okay.
And I can share the information and the links in your email in the follow-up email to everyone as
Oh,
well too, so
great.
that you're not going to miss anything.
Great.
Get the link for the survey in there. Any questions, or if anybody would like to share, what intergenerational programs or coalitions you have in your community, that would be great as well too. Let's
Yeah,
see.
thank you for putting all those links in, Ginger. That's
Yeah, you got it. Let's see, I have one in Centennial. So Colorado, we do have some folks from across multiple states, so that's exciting. But Rose is sharing in Centennial, there is a partnership with YMCA, and the facility is called Center for Generations, Older Adults with Youth.
oh my gosh. That's awesome.
Sounds great.
I'm gonna have to check that out, Rose. Thanks for sharing that.
Claudia mentioned, thank you for having the survey in Spanish. Absolutely.
Well, to Rose's point, I'm going to add that, as you're thinking, again, frame this from an extension standpoint, but recognizing that when I gave examples like consider having a 4-H club, do this. I mean, you might consider having a boys and girls club, or if there is, a leadership club at a local school system that somehow you're affiliated with or connected with, you could tap into those clubs or groups to engage with older adults in your community. So it doesn't have to be necessarily 4-H, just giving that as an example.
Great. I don't see any more questions that come in, but thank you so much, Christine. We have a lot of resources to give out. So it takes just a little bit for the recordings to process, and I will email everyone a copy of the recordings in both English and Spanish, our survey links in English and Spanish, and then the plethora of resources that you shared with us today, Christine. Thank you so much. And I just want to share with everybody before we leave. I want to say thank you to Allie Eden with Language Justice Matters for providing interpretation and translation services for this entire series. She's been wonderful. And lastly, I want to remind everyone of our next webinar happening on March 13th, 11:30 to 1, just like today, and that's Mountain Standard Time. We're excited to welcome Cheryl Noble, Advanced Directive Specialist, and Kat Laws from the UC Health Aspen Club, who will be discussing the power of prevention and staying ahead of the curve with advanced care planning. So just want to let everybody know you are more than welcome to attend. We'll keep on sharing recordings. We've had great attendance, and have a great day.